Hello, hello. Welcome to the 27th episode of the Veggies Abroad Vegan Travel Podcast with the chief veggie pusher, myself, Rebecca Gade Sawicki. Some of you may already be familiar with Veggies Abroad, but for those of you who aren't, we're a full-service vegan travel company that offers custom planning services, small group trips, a helpful blog chock full of just about everything a vegan or veg-curious traveler could need, and this podcast. With this podcast, I hope to bring you guys the inside scoop of what vegan-friendly, and eco-friendly businesses are doing in the wide world of travel. So, as of the air date of this episode, we are less than a week until our vegan tour to Costa Rica. Before every tour, I start a WhatsApp group so that people can chat and ask questions, and it's always a fun way to get to know people just a tiny bit before we're all together. One of our travelers even started packing 2 weeks before the trip, which made me so excited that they were so excited to get a jump start. Those moments they're really nice. It's a really cool highlight sometimes, and it's a super small thing and you wouldn't think it's such a big deal, but I think it's very cool. Having these groups is also lovely because people can stay in touch after the trip. And I still sometimes get messages from past travelers, which is often such a nice bonus of group travel, especially when you're traveling with folks that you really like and you want to hang out more with. If you're interested in following along on our Costa Rica journey, be sure to follow Veggies Abroad on Instagram or on our Facebook group. And I'm even toying with the idea of doing a daily video vlog. And now that I've let those words escape out of my mouth, I might regret saying that. If I do it, I will send them out via our newsletter, and you can join via the link in the show notes. So, in addition to Costa Rica, we are also just 2 weeks away from the deadline for our vegan tour to Iceland in May 2025. If you've been thinking about it or would be interested in sharing a room with a lovely lady, let me know. This is going to be an incredible adventure. If you want to learn more about Iceland and the trip, scroll back a few episodes. We did one dedicated just to Iceland and chatted about puffins, waterfalls, geothermal energy, vegan chocolate at gas stations, and much, much more. Today's episode actually started during one of our last tours, our vegan tour to Bali. During the trip, I had the opportunity to chat with today's guest about a topic that I hadn't really thought about before: conscious or grounded travel. I'll admit, when I first thought about this, I just pictured yoga retreats and a whole lot of While that could be a way that you're more conscious or connected to the natural world, it goes much farther than that and is a way for us all to take a pause and be more aware about all of the decisions, both travel and in our daily lives, that we make. That point really resonated with me. I think it's really, really easy, probably way too easy, to get caught up in all of the Instagrammable moments and forget about why we're going somewhere, how we're being responsible when we go, and an even bigger question: should we go at all? So, my dear friend Matthew Kessi is joining us to discuss all of this and more. Matthew Kessi is a travel writer, nature photographer, and practical mystic. His superpower is leading people through their own wilderness to the liminal space of nature's intelligence, where transformation thrives. Originally from Oregon, Matthew has traveled to over 60 countries and lives in Seattle. He leads mystic nature experiences, and his website, kessiworld.com, integrates travel, nature, and spirit. Without further ado, let's chat with Matthew. Hi, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you again.
Thank you for having me on. It's also great to see you.
Awesome. So I think this is going to be a very good conversation. It's a part of travel that I am not familiar with and not practicing of. Well, maybe in ways that I don't realize. But I think others might feel the same. So I think this will be educational for one and all. So as I was reading through your bio, a line caught my attention, and that is: his superpower is leading people through their own wilderness to the liminal space of nature's intelligence, where transformation thrives. Can we talk a little bit about that and what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Where to start with this? My belief structure is such that we as humans have, been around, let's say, for 30,000 years. And for 29,500 of those, we deeply depended on connection to the natural world for survival, shelter and food and all these different things. And then over time, the last 500 years in particular, let's just say, as we've gained rapid increases in technology and even how travel has changed, even in the last 20 years with the way that we have airfares that are cheap and this to go here and there, we've stopped using those muscles of connection to the natural world. And this is a broad generalization, but in general, we're not relying on our connection to the natural world as much as we have for most of our history. And so what my work is to help people wake up to that. Because it's almost like you have a sleeper cell in your part of our lizard brain that we just know. We know nature. Our lizard brain knows nature. We know when we see a sunset that, oh, wow, like that's incredible. Or just water, going to the beach, hearing the waves. Most people just, it's almost like a trance. It's like, wow, the waves, the water, or a lake, or a river. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's because what water meant was food in the past. It meant fish.
Yeah.
It meant travel. It meant a way to move. The forest meant protection, trees. So my work is to help people find ways that make sense for them to wake back up to that aspect of our connection to nature that we are biologically wired to. And I say the wilderness of your life because as we've moved away from this connection to nature, these trees have sprouted up that are all these other things of daily life, let's say. Maybe complications, all of the circumstances of a world where we're told we have to go faster and faster. We have to do production and all these different value systems that come at us. So we layer in all these things. And I did that when I worked in the corporate world for 25 years. I had my sense of who I was, and I stuck to that. And I had these other things that came in, like productivity and reducing costs, all these things that worked into that narrative. And so it becomes a wilderness of daily life. And so my work is to help people navigate through that wilderness. And you don't just cut all the trees down and do, and start from scratch. We don't have that luxury in life. And so what I do is help people navigate through that forest using the lizard brain connection we already have to nature, to the natural world.
It's like new forest management.
That's right. New forest management. Yeah. Thinning the right things, taking out the right things. It's surgical.
Yeah.
If you think about your life, there are things that are wonderful, and there's things that are your loves and your joys, and there's other things that maybe are a little bit of a burr in your bonnet. I don't know where that phrase came from, but you know what I mean. Maybe some annoyances, maybe there's sadness, or maybe there's areas, depending on who you are. If you're out in the audience, maybe you in a place where you want healing or you want new ideas, awakening. So it's really surgical, and it's unique to every individual because all of our circumstances are unique in many ways. And so my work is to help people find their connection to the natural world in ways that make sense.
It's very interesting. And so when it comes to kind of the idea of travel, tell me if this is kind of the right term for it. Would you consider this mindful travel, meditative travel? What would you call it?
I would call it grounded travel.
Okay, grounded travel.
Grounded travel.
I like that.
Because back to my point of 30,000 years of human history, most of the time, 9,000 years of that, we moved maybe 60 miles a year. Humans were, we hunted and gathered, but we didn't go long distances.
Right.
And so now we put ourselves into tubes, metal tubes, and hurl ourselves across continents.
That is wild when you think of it in those two very distinct examples. It's wild how much has changed.
Yeah, and in a short period of time.
Yes.
So I believe biologically we haven't caught up to that. We have found ways to cope. Some people cope better than others. And in my past life, I worked for an airline for 25 years, and most of that was in a business capacity. And I traveled a lot. But my first few years, I was in college, and I started as a baggage handler, but then I moved into the inside, as they called it, as a ticket agent, a gate agent, lost luggage agent.
You poor thing! Oh my gosh!
And so I got to see up front and close and personal how ungrounding travel is.
Yeah.
Because many people who were good, I believe were good people, turned into monsters when they were traveling. I'm sure you've seen this too. You don't have to go very far to look in the media, something that happened on an airplane or in these different cases. And I believe it's because there's parts of us where we're unsettled when we're traveling because we're just not biologically accustomed to that. And so it makes it even more important to find grounding where you can when you're traveling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that maybe that's mindful, maybe that's meditative. It's ultimately just a matter of understanding that you need a connection, you need a ground. And the natural world has been part of our lives for so long, 30,000 years, that's a really good place to go. Just like I said, we know a sunset we know we're mystified by the colors and the changes. And so there's these things that we just feel. Mm-hmm. We don't even necessarily understand. And so it's about finding that grounding wherever you go, so that the rest of the experience is going to be the things that you enjoy.
Yeah, and are important. And so that's interesting, continuing on this travel path. So if you're planning a trip, we'll start on the planning side of things. And if we're trying to be more mindful or utilize techniques of grounding, how would you go about that? How do you go about that, I guess is the best way to put it?
Well, in an ideal world, this is how I see it, and this is what I do. In an ideal world, you would prepare before you go on your trip, and you would have a daily practice or some kind of practice of grounding, of learning what it feels like to connect to nature in a deeper way. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do, leading people into nature for walks and things like that. And it's about taking time to set that up. Recent studies, bodies of research now show that 2 hours a week needs to be 2 hours, but 2 hours a week of nature immersion, like actually something that's two-way connective, not just going for a fast walk or running or that type of thing, but really connective. 2 hours a week is enough to start making lasting changes in your life around anxiety, around even reducing inflammation, all these different kinds of things. And I break that up into 20 minutes a day. Either way, but 20 minutes a day is enough to start practicing that. And so ideally, you would practice that ahead of time so you understand the feelings, you understand what connection means, so that when you get on a plane, you go somewhere, you have a system in place to say, okay, I'm in a new place. These are my practices. And then you can set that up to find a garden by your hotel or even a plant. But you have that practice, the muscle memory to help you.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably a really great way. If travel makes you nervous or anxious in any way, that could be a really nice way to manage it. One thing we talked about, so you were also on our Bali trip in September. And so we got some time to really chat about this in more detail. And one thing that I really liked that we hit on was kind of connecting these ideas with, being more of a responsible traveler, being a more sustainable traveler, and being very aware of the choices that you were making, and where you were traveling, who you were talking to, how you were talking to them. And I think that's a part of travel that's sorely missing. And that's not the part of travel that we see that gets splayed across the news when some poor baggage handlers getting screamed at.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think, like, let's talk about that a little bit more and how those things kind of play a part.
Great question. We had a really nice conversation. I think we were on a bus ride.
Yes.
For hours upon hours. We had lots of time to talk about that.
We did.
So thank you for reminding me of that. Back to the work that I do of leading people through their wilderness is really leading you through to a destination, or really just the experience of the journey of self-clarity. Because when we're in our natural world, when we're navigating through nature and connecting, we can see ourselves more clearly. And it's in this clarity that helps us make decisions, decisions about where we want to go, if we want to travel somewhere, about why do we want to go to this particular place. And when you make those decisions, you're choosing to honor your own nature. And so you move away from FOMO type of decisions, for example. Like, I should just go here because everybody goes here.
Yes.
And I'll bring up, on our Bali trip, the last day, remember we took the ferry. And by the way, you did an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
Curating the tour. And you were a lot of fun. You brought a lot of energy, and I really enjoyed the trip. And for your audience, we just were on this vegan tour of Bali 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So it's fresh on my mind. And the last day, we got on a ferry. We crossed over this water. And we got to this island, and then 500 little white cars picked up all these people and drove them through beautiful island, jungle, little villages and things. And it almost felt like an episode of Black Mirror, because we were all in these little
Oh my gosh, yeah. Cars. What a good example.
Almost as if we were on a conveyor belt. We get to this beautiful natural feature, which was like rock stacks and blowholes and things like that, where 500 people got out and took pictures and then got back in their car, the white car, and then we drove again. And so this isn't a criticism of our tour as much as the reason why that was probably suggested to you and why it was put in was because, well, you should go see this feature.
Yes.
And even for me, because I could have opted out that day. I mean, no one was making me do that. I also had this, I wonder what that is. Well, I'm curious. Doesn't necessarily sound like I need to do this, but I'm curious. So, and I also write about travel, and I integrate travel and nature. So I thought, so I was in that same place of, well, why not? Let's go see it. And so it's about that self-clarity is about the understanding that, let's say you were doing this trip on your own independently, of understanding, I probably don't need to do that, or I know enough about what I really want in this trip, because Bali is just exquisite. And we got to experience so much of that it helps steer away from some of those FOMO type of experiences, like doing this thing. And who knows what the impact on the island is. It's probably substantial impact. And so that's just a little example of how knowing yourself more clearly, being aware of FOMO, like, why am I wanting to do this? Is it just because I think I should? Is it because I saw it on social media, and so it seems like it's some part of a list of things to do? Or do I really feel really passionate and drawn to that? And is that going to be additive to my life? And so many experiences in travel are additive. So this isn't about shaming anything or saying you're doing it right or wrong. It's about fine tuning and the nuances of, like, what really matters to me.
Yeah.
And I know what matters to your travelers. They're vegan and they want plant-based options. They want delicious food. They want to celebrate that and know that when they go to a restaurant, there's something there for them to eat, to enjoy, and not just be salad.
Yeah, not lettuce.
Not just lettuce or, corn and carrots. And so you already, this is already a group of people who are really mindful about really what's important, and willing to go the extra mile to ask questions, to make sure the environment is going to be something that's going to be additive to travel. And so in a certain way, for me on this Bali trip, I was folding in things that are really important to me, which is being grounded and really understanding, like, why do I want to do this? Is it really aligned with my true self, my inner wilderness? Or is it something that, these external forces are asking me or telling me or suggesting I do? So for me, I got to fold in these aspects of being really, really mindful. And then with grounding, another aspect of this is really paying attention, understanding where you are, like the literal ground, and how that impacts travel. Again, is about meeting people who are locals, going to places where they share their traditions. And that's grounding, because you're making a connection to somebody who's locally there. Our guide was a local guide. She explained lots of things about her culture. And for all of us, I saw that as we were grounding in the rich culture, the Balinese culture, and we were taking that in, and we were little bits by bits, we were feeling like we were part of that land. And that's the magic of travel. That's the beauty of going to new places. And so it's in that clarity of, why do I want to go to this place? And then when I'm there, what am I going to do when I'm there to ensure that I ground and that I feel part of the land? Because when you feel like you're part of the land, like, then you can breathe and exhale. And some of that travel anxiety, which is natural, like I pointed out, it's natural. Some of that can go away because there's a little bit of a familiarity around, this might be what home feels like, even though I'm in a different place. Like, there's people that have different backgrounds and culture, but we also are very similar. We have family structures, we have hopes and dreams. It's not that foreign after all. It's not just the honking horns and the fast food chains and all those kind of things that you can find anywhere. It's really this feeling that you can have even a temporary amount of belonging wherever you are in the world. And that's really, really the benefit of doing this work to connect yourself deeper in the natural world, is that it's like the World Wide Web. The nature connection is all over the globe, and you plug in wherever you go. It's just that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, as you were talking about, connecting to the land, connecting to the people, when you really think about those things, you really respect and take those things in, and evaluate that experience, and appreciate that experience, then you're more likely to want to protect those experiences. And I feel like so often when people go into the world and they see these places that are beautiful, or maybe they've been hit by over-tourism or poverty, whatever it is, they see these things, you have a new appreciation for them, and then you realize, we have to take care of these things. Maybe we go back into our communities with a full heart of, okay, I have to take care of what I've got here. Like, what I have is actually better than I realized, or is more delicate and fragile than I realized. And I have to take care of that. I think that's a really important thing about travel that maybe gets buried under the FOMO. I'm glad you brought up the FOMO. That's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, when I first started working as the ticket agent, a long time ago, there weren't as many people in the world traveling. So I used my flight benefits. I went all over the world and got to experience all these different things. And as there's been more prosperity in lots of different places, there's probably literally 2 billion people now that have the means and have the interest to travel the world. and have access to social media and the all the different types of videos and the top 10 lists and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so FOMO is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. I feel really passionately that what should drive the travel experience and the desire to go places is really about that inner clarity of what you really want and what you really value. Because we don't have the capacity for everybody in the world, 2 billion people in the world, to just go somewhere because it's on a list, to just go somewhere because they saw it on social media and they think that they should do that because it symbolizes something. There isn't the capacity, we don't have the time for that. And at the same time, with self-clarity, maybe there are places that are closer to where you live that also can bring about that joy. Maybe they're not on social media, but there's a lake or there's a river or there's a park by your house. And so that's another part of that you can balance. I do a lot of work. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Oregon. I live in Washington today. And I do a lot of work with people, both writing articles and helping people with their trips on the Oregon coast. And I do videos. I make videos. And sometimes the comments in the sections are like, well, everybody's going to Cannon Beach. There's 1 million people that go to Cannon Beach, which is the iconic beach, which is in all the movies and all those kinds of things. It's beautiful. I grew up about an hour from that growing up, so our family went there all the time because it was the closest beach. Mm-hmm. And Oregon has 363 miles of coastline that's all public. 2/3 of the coast land adjacent to the coastline is public land.
That's amazing.
That's parks and campgrounds and all these different things. And there's relatively, there's a relatively low number of people that visit the Oregon coast when you compare to lots of other places. And my point being is that you don't have to go to Cannon Beach.
Yeah.
You can drive 15 miles down the road and find an exquisite beach and make that your experience, make that your connection. And so there's lots of places in the world to go. And it's about finding that clarity about what really is important to you.
Hey there, fantastic listeners. Let's hit pause on this episode for a thrilling announcement, a golden ticket to Globetrot with Veggies Abroad. Veggies Abroad isn't just your go-to for vegan guides and trip planning tips. It's your passport to extraordinary small group journeys, carefully crafted by the ultimate veggie pusher and your favorite podcast host, me, Rebecca Gade Sawicki. I've spent countless hours researching the best vegan hotels, food, and experiences, and now I'm bringing those experiences directly to you. Join me and my newfound veggie pals on escapades to exciting and exotic destinations around the world. Whether it's trekking through the Thai jungle to witness elephants in their natural habitat, or staying at a carbon-neutral camp in Kenya during the Great Migration, our adventures are nothing short of spectacular. And guess what? Those aren't the only exciting trips awaiting you. So what are you waiting for? Cruise on over to veggiesabroad.com pronto. Well, how about after this episode is over, to explore our dazzling lineup of 2024 trips and secure your spot on your next vegan adventure today. Yeah, I think with the grounding idea, it's kind of resetting those expectations. I was just writing an article for a publication about common mistakes that vegans make when planning trips. And my first one is not being clear with what your priorities are and your expectations, and moving away from seeing, the pictures online or having your friend tell you that you have to go X, Y, and Z, and you just go and book your ticket. Because before you do that, you need to have a conscious conversation with yourself of, what do I want to get out of this? Do I want this to be a food trip? Do I want to have to wear stretchy pants? Do I want to get lost in a jungle and see toucans? Do I want to lay on a beach and have nobody see me for 10 days? These are all very different experiences, and you're not going to be able to cross all of them over, and you're not going to find everything always in one. And that sets you up for failure and sets you up for thinking that was terrible. And you don't then appreciate what could possibly be there. Because I think so often there are so many places around the world and there's so much that they have to offer, but you just have to be realistic and flexible and open to what they might, offer you. And I think that's like very, very kind of on the same line of kind of what you're talking about with the grounding and being aware. I always want to keep saying mindful.
You can say mindful. Demure.
I was going to say we're going to stick a demure in there too, aren't we?
Put a demure in there. Yeah.
At some point, it will get very cutesy.
Yeah, for sure. Demure, cutesy, and mindful.
Yeah.
The trifecta.
Yeah, absolutely. The trifecta. Oh, isn't that a trip for you?
Yeah.
So we've touched on nature a little bit and, moved into that. So you have kind of two different trips here. Say someone is going into a city and it's wild and crazy and busy. Somebody else is kind of going into a jungle. Both, I think you'll say, have the opportunities to be aware, to be connected, but they're different. So how would you approach two different types of trips like that?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's opportunity in both places. My niece lives in Brooklyn, and I used to go to New York a lot for work, and it was really, really hard because they were just all, New York City's fantastic, and also it's also frenetic and has this energy. And so when I go to visit my niece, I make it a point to find places that are a little quieter, like the riverfront along the East River, for example. There are opportunities in any destination to find a connection to the natural world. And it may not seem as obvious in a city like New York versus in a countryside on a mountain range, but both really have to do with how you are interpreting nature. Because you could go to a mountainside resort and be on your phone the whole time. You could live in that frenetic energy that New York City has. You can live with that in your head, and I think many people know that. And many people say, yeah, I know, and I don't want to do that. So in both cases, it's really about what's going on in your inner self. And because I've gone to New York, I've stayed, my niece lives in Brooklyn, and there's a beautiful park a few blocks from her house. It's in the city. There's noises and sounds, but there's trees, there's water. There are these components that I can connect to. And I'm mindful about that, using the word mindful, but there's a way to do that. And it's a practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I encourage, people to do in my videos, in my writing, is this is a practice around grounding. And it doesn't change everything immediately, but it starts to build muscle memory. It starts to wake you up and remind you about the lizard brain back there saying, yes, I want this quiet or this grounding. And even if it's sitting on a bench in a park for 20 minutes and slowly just practicing and learning, like the first day you sit on the bench in the park, you may be looking at things all over the place. You may pick up your phone. Maybe the next day you don't pick up your phone and you're still looking at the squirrels or the dogs. And then maybe the next day, it's really about practice and learning how to do that so that no matter where you go, you can remember, oh yeah, I can connect here. I can look at this tree and then of course, places with abundant natural beauty are a little easier for that to happen because it's hitting you in the head like, oh, mountains.
Right.
Gorgeous.
Right. That makes total sense.
Yeah. And so I have a framework of 6 questions that I talk about, I write about, I have videos about 6 questions to deepen your nature connection. And those are meant to be a framework to help people with some of the steps and their questions to ask about how do I want to show up today to nature, which is also to my own nature. Questions like, how do I want to be present today? How can I remind myself that I might be prone to thinking about these other things? And it's really about not saying don't think about those things. It's about really just training yourself to understand that it's going to happen, and how can I make that thing a cloud and just kind of let that cloud pass by so that I can go back to this connection. So there's some questions that can be helpful, a framework. But really, it's just about what traditions and what things make sense in your life and your circumstances in your life. And it could be as simple as taking off your shoes and your socks and walking on grass. And that texture, that touch reminds you, or the smells of nature, it reminds you. So you can do that in New York City. You can go to Central Park, take off your shoes, walk on the grass, lay down on the grass. There's lots of things you can do to really, like in New York, imagine you just pause a little bit. Just pause some of the energy.
Yeah.
Because people go there because they like the energy.
Yeah.
Great. Pause the energy for just a little bit so your system can reboot, reconnect. And then you're open to all the fun things that you want to do in New York.
Keeping with the New York example, do you ever use some of the unnatural things to connect, like the sounds of the horns or people yelling at each other? I feel like New York is a very musical town in a non-musical sense. And I always sometimes think like, I will stop sometimes and really listen to that. And I enjoy, this is going to sound strange. I enjoy that chaos. And so for some reason, like that is kind of a connection to me. Because that's what I really like about the city. I like that there's so much going on and you can be just a single human standing in the middle of it. But I never thought about that as like a natural connection because it's not necessarily natural, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting because I do 2-hour nature immersion experiences in a park here by my home in Seattle. And even though it's a beautiful nature space, it'd be like Central Park. There's airplanes flying over, there's human noises. It's not as loud as Times Square. But there's things. And there's an exercise I do where I ask people to tune in almost as if they have earbuds to all the sounds of nature and not nature, human things. And everyone has a different perspective on that. Some people say, well, I heard the airplanes and I heard the leaf blower, and then it just kind of folded into the symphony that actually made me feel connected to myself, or, and then other people, like, it was a little jarring to hear this. So again, it really is about what makes sense. And really the key is just really learning how to trust your inner self, trust your intuition about that, and really listen to, okay, like this, because music is healing. Music is helpful too. Music sometimes can be disruptive. It just depends. There's all different tastes. And so it's about listening to that and being able to discern, like, am I telling myself that I like the honking horns, or do I really feel like that's all just part of the symphony of the city? And it's different answers for different people.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we started kind of talking about this, of how someone kind of could get started. And so if someone has never, done anything meditative or, really embraced nature in this way, could they start in their own backyard maybe this weekend? Are there easy ways to kind of move them into that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if your brain's used to working all the time, you can't just tell your brain to stop. So it's helpful to be realistic about that. And it's also helpful to give your brain a job to do.
True, yes.
And that's a lot of the activities that I do with people, leading them. Like, there's always something the brain can do. And then the rest of the operating system can start to slow down, and then the brain follows, usually. So you could go out into your backyard, you could go to a park, and you could look at a tree and you could just follow the branches. And so the brain's part of that, like, okay, follow the branches. The brain can be curiosity, maybe. Like, how high does the branch go on this tree? And then maybe how high does it go on this tree? Or, what? And so that's the way that you can, the gateway to nature from that perspective is really engaging in simple ways, and it can be fun ways. If you have kids, it can be fun to count the number of red leaves on the tree in the autumn, or where do you think this river is going to go, or those kinds of things that start to just engage being more present there. Because if you're looking at the branches, even if you're comparing the trees or these other things, you are there with the tree. That you're starting to be there, and you're starting to take in these things. So that can happen with a houseplant. I have an email that I send out every week about grounding, little hints to help people find grounding. And one of the hints is, imagine you're going to take a picture of your houseplant. And how would you, or you're going to paint it. You don't have to be a fantastic painter. How would you depict your houseplant? What would you go in close? Would you pan into the leaf and the veins of the interesting leaf, or would you come out and would you put your houseplant in the context of your house? Even just doing something like that, you're connecting to the plant in a different way, maybe than day after day. If you water the plant, but you pass by. So it's these kind of things that can even start with 5 minutes or 2 minutes, and then grow into, ultimately the benefit is 20 minutes or more a day or 2 hours a week of that's what I mean, that kind of connective thing where you're looking at maybe something you pass by every day in a different way. And you're saying, oh, hello, I see you. Yeah. Oh, wow, like that fern, that in our area, we have lots of sword ferns, and they're beautiful, and they have lots of personality. And I think a lot of people that go hiking, they pass by ferns and they're like, oh, ferns, great. Where's the waterfall? And so it's about like revisiting the fern, saying hello.
Yeah. So then you could kind of start at your home, 5 minutes and 2 minutes, build upon it, and then bring that kind of into your travel itinerary. You might find unexpectedly that you're thinking about things differently when you start to think about things differently in your own home, if that makes sense. Did that make sense? I think that made sense.
That made sense.
Yeah, I like that, the building on it, because I think for so many people, this might be a concept that they overlook or think is too wooey. But it could have a lot of benefits, and there are really easy ways to just start small, build upon it, see where it takes you from there, and just to be more considerate of everything. I think it's something that could be beneficial in unexpected ways. Maybe that was my long course way to get to that point.
Yeah. Well, because if you start to see items of nature differently, you might not trample the flower, or you might not just, and so I the energy behind all of the work I want to do, what I'm doing now, is really about helping the collective change as well. But it starts with us. It starts with me looking at the fern differently, or not just walking over the flower because I didn't even see it, in a lawn or something.
Excellent,
let's say.
Point. Yeah.
And so it's really about changing the thought process of the collective. And we can't do that by telling everyone else not to do stuff, or I can't do that by saying everyone else go out in nature. I have to start with myself. And I have to start by bringing my medicine back to the earth, because nature wants us to reconnect. And so that's the bigger picture of my work, because travel is wonderful. Travel is rewarding. And so and in some ways it's about how do you get back to the land when you go somewhere? Well, I believe you get back to the land by being present with the land. And that energy is I believe it's real. And offering that exchange and that grounding, it radiates out to other people. This last weekend, I was on the Olympic Peninsula. I was doing some filming for the meditation videos that I create. And as I would go to a place and stop and ponder and do my work to be connective, I would notice people would come closer to me, and they would stand right next to me.
No way,
or
really?
Behind me. In the middle of these weren't crowded places.
Yeah, I've seen some of your pictures. No, you're like the single human out there.
And I was like, why what's going on here? But I believe that people like that calm, that feeling of connective, that energy that does radiate out in ways that we don't understand, we can't comprehend as humans, but there's things that we sense, and we want to be calm. In our culture, our society doesn't always promote that, but we want it. We crave that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah.
So you've mentioned your retreats a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about them. Can you talk a bit about, what people can expect to find at one of your retreats in the lovely Pacific Northwest, and what inspired you to start them?
Yes. Well, first of all, you inspired me to start them.
No, I did not.
You started to produce and promote and curate tours of places, vegan tours all over the world, and I was part of one, and it was fantastic. And your courage to take something you felt passionate about and put that out into the world inspired me.
Aww.
And there were other factors, of course, too, but that was something that was like, no, I can do it. This thing that I've been dreaming about, because I've been dreaming about doing retreats to help people connect to nature, to connect to the land.
Yeah.
And so I created the retreat about a year and a half ago on the Olympic Peninsula, and we stay in 2 beautiful beach houses, very well appointed, 5-star luxury amenities. And it goes beyond the luxuries that you would expect. And it's really about giving people space, because you're removed from daily life, but really give you space to wake up those parts of you that are yearning to have grounding, that are yearning to have calm, especially for working people who have lots going on. And we work with the framework that I talked about earlier, 6 questions to ask yourself to deepen your nature connection. And we do activities with each of these questions that are 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes they're going into nature. They're very simple hikes from the perspective of maybe 3/4 of a mile, but we spend maybe 2 hours in that 3/4 of a mile learning about like how to slow down so that we can take in the edges of the fern, and we can see how that, what that might mean for my personal development and seeing myself more clearly. And the outcome is always that people see themselves more clearly, and they take with them actionable items to integrate into daily life. And when you see yourself more clearly, you also can see things when you're in the moment more clearly. You can see scenarios, whether that's work or travel. You can see yourself more clearly in the moment, and you maybe can make different decisions. You can maybe take different action than an older version of you, because you're more comfortable seeing yourself, seeing like, oh, I'm prone to this. Okay, well, maybe now this time I can make a different decision. Maybe this time when I'm planning my trip, I'll make a different decision, and I'll plan a day that's just open with nothing to do. Or maybe I'll opt out of this experience, and maybe I'll go towards this experience.
Yeah, that is a good point. And so how long are these retreats? What is kind of a general flow of the days? Are there certain things people should expect? Are there certain people maybe this isn't great for, or certain people this is really great for?
Okay. Yeah, it's, well, my background, I'm a practical mystic. And so what this means is that I've spent my whole life communicating with nature spirits, with the natural world, in 2-way communication. And so I'm able to help people find that communication with nature's intelligence, is what I call it. And nature's intelligence is the sunset that we see, that all these technicolors that we can explain with science, but there's also part of us where it resonates with our spirit, or how the salmon know where to go up the river to spawn, the exact place that their ancestors have done for 500 years. That's nature's intelligence. And nature's intelligence is waiting to help every person reconnect, reunite with the land. And so it's about these questions to ask yourself, but I facilitate and hold that space so that people can experiment with that, feel what that's like in a safe place where they're guided and they're supported. And sometimes it's very magical. Sometimes it's very altered state without taking anything. It's just a matter of slowing down enough to find those connections. And in that way, I serve as a translator. And I can help people in the translation of what nature might be wanting for them, or the information that maybe wants to come through. And there are a lot of tools at our disposal when we do this. There can be ancestors, there can be visitations from ancestors, there can be a lot of different types of friendly, helpful energies that really truly want to help people in whatever way you're open to. So there's an intensity that can be there for people who are ready for that, but the participant always has a dial that can turn up or down. And in general, I find that every participant leaves in awe of the power they have to find this connection. And it's really about empowering people to keep that connection going, to keep doing these things that are very rewarding physiologically, even with our bodies and healing, but also from a spiritual perspective. This lines up with all different kinds of spiritualities, and also emotionally. There's lots of space to use this connection for healing, for opening up to awakening, new ideas, maybe transitions, people not sure what they want to do next in their life, and then general wellness.
Yeah. And is it just a weekend?
Right now, the retreats are 3 days.
Okay.
We arrive on Friday, leave on Sunday, and in the future, who knows, might expand.
Ooh, that could be nice. And are they small groups or private?
They could be private. I could set that up. Right now, they're set up for groups from 1 to 4 people, so it's a very intimate setting. It's a lot of one-on-one work and opportunity to really practice in real time and not just abstract things. This is real practical experiences in nature.
Are there things that people have to prepare ahead of time?
No, really just preparing from the standpoint of really being open to the experience and bringing everything and being open to certain vulnerabilities. There definitely are aspects of vulnerability for people who aren't used to working in that liminal space you mentioned, or that's in my bio, but that liminal space can be uncomfortable or unfamiliar for people. So it's just about being open to that vulnerability.
Yeah, I feel like that could take some people, okay, maybe me, a couple of days just to feel comfortable with that discomfort. And you might need a couple retreats before you really feel like you get to some point where you've made progress.
Yeah, I mean, and all this work is progress, but in a lot of ways it can be a disruptive thing. Yeah. And also, sometimes what we need in our life is a disruption that within the right
within reason
framework. Yeah, within reason, of course, but it's that disruption that helps you understand. Oh, okay, I wasn't seeing that about myself. For whatever reason, I didn't want to see it, or or I was protecting myself for all these different reasons, and that's all okay. Sometimes a little disruption is about, oh, okay, I do have the wherewithal, like I do have the capacity to make this shift in my career, or I can do this. So I see that disruption as a positive, of a reminder for us that we, like nature has these elements, these laws, like everything in nature is interdependent. That means that we belong as humans. Everything in nature is changing constantly, all the time. You see that all the time. And that means, as part of nature, humans are resilient. What we can face, we can handle. And then the third general principle is everything in nature has a purpose. And we all have a purpose. And so these just many little disruptions help us see that in ways that are really empowering, and ways that really, like I said, about that waking up, that concept of waking up. You're really waking up to yourself.
Yeah, wow, that is powerful. So if people are interested in learning more about these, where would they go?
I have a website called kessiworld.com. And on social media, it's a similar handle. I have a YouTube channel with nature connection experiences that are 20 minutes, because I talked about that 20-minute, the power of the 20 minutes. And those are the experiences that I'm creating for YouTube that would map to the in-person retreats, or, so if you're not in the Pacific Northwest. And I encourage people to go to that channel. And also I have emails that I send out a few times a week that are very short, but they're about connecting little tips to find grounding, like looking at the leaves of your houseplant, taking off your shoes and walking in the grass. Mm-hmm. And then every Wednesday I do what's called a photo journey, and I give 6 photos that correspond to the 6 questions to deepen your nature. And you can just go through the photos of beautiful places in nature. And that's also a way to just practice for 1 minute or 2 minutes in the morning and just see how that works and how that feels. And ultimately, this is an ongoing practice that helps you with the trajectory of your life.
The emails are great. I do enjoy them. As I swear, one of your emails always comes in when I'm really busy or my inbox is full, and I look at it and I'm like, you're going to delete that, aren't you? You kind of want to delete it, don't you? And I'm like, no, you need to look at it. And so you always, you're in my ear and you're like, no, stop for a minute, stop. And so you make me think a little bit differently about things it might be a short period. It could only be 30 seconds that I've worked up to, but it has worked. So
good.
Congratulations with that.
well, that's my point. Like, even if you don't read it, if it's just a little bit in your mind, it's enough. It's planting the seed. It's that process over time of becoming comfortable with that notion. And maybe it will be 1 minute. Maybe it will go to 5 minutes, or maybe once a week. It really is just about me feeling really passionate about helping people where it makes sense for you right now in that morning, opening up the emails.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm happy that you look at it and you pause.
Yes, the pause.
I'll take it.
Yes, take what you can get. And I love the point of planting a seed. Like with so many things, we have to start somewhere, whether it's, being more responsible, traveling better, being more aware, being a better human. We have to start somewhere. We have to plant that seed. And I think this is a good thing, not only for travel, but for, people's daily lives. But of course would enhance your travel to add into it. So I appreciate you taking the time to chat and share your experience with listeners. And I hope that everyone gets something out of it and they go and check out your lovely retreats or your YouTube channel.
Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for tuning in today. And I hope to see you all down the road.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. If you'd also like to learn more about upcoming Veggies Abroad tours or get additional travel help, visit veggiesabroad.com and also join our newsletter. It's the best way to stay up to date with loads of new content, like where to find gorgeous vegan hotels, what to eat in cities around the world, trip planning tips, and so much more. Well, that's all I've got for now. Until next time.